The papers fell from my shaking hands. $8 million. The check was real. I stared at it through my tears, remembering the day I lost everything. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Rachel Morgan. 3 years ago, I thought I had the perfect life, a beautiful mansion in Highland Park, Dallas. 2 amazing kids, Jacob, 10, and Emily, 7. Even our golden retriever Max seemed to complete our picture-perfect family. Daniel, my husband of 12 years, was a successful real estate developer. We met in college when I was studying architecture and he was in business school. He was charming, ambitious, and promised me the world. And for a while he gave it to me. "Rachel, you're going to be the happiest woman in Dallas," he told me on our wedding day. "I'm going to build you a castle." The mansion was our dream home. Daniel designed it himself, though he always brushed off my suggestions about structural details. "Leave the technical stuff to me, babe," he'd say. "You just focus on making it beautiful. This will be our forever home, Rachel," he said, holding me close as we watched the construction crews pour the foundation. "Our kids will grow up here. We'll grow old here together. This house will be our legacy." I believed every word. I watched that house rise from the ground like it was our love made solid. Every brick, every beam, every window felt like a promise of our future. But dreams can become nightmares faster than you think. And sometimes, the house that's supposed to protect you becomes the weapon that destroys you. It started with late nights. Daniel would come home at midnight, smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't mine. His phone was always face down. He took calls in private, walking out to the garden where he thought I couldn't hear. "Rachel, you're being paranoid," he'd say when I asked questions. "I'm building our future. Trust me. These deals don't make themselves." But I noticed other things too. New clothes in his closet that I hadn't bought him. Credit card statements that he kept locked in his office. Weekend business trips that never seemed to involve any actual business. Trust is like glass. Once it cracks, you can see through it. And I was starting to see through everything. One Tuesday morning, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. It was from Rosewood Mansion on Turtle Creek, the most expensive restaurant in Dallas. For 2 people, for $300, on a night he said he was working alone in his office until 2 a.m. My heart stopped. My hands shook as I stared at that little piece of paper. The restaurant was downtown. I had never been there. When I called and asked about the reservation, they said it was under Mr. and Mrs. Morgan. "Oh yes," the hostess said cheerfully. "Your husband and his companion had a wonderful evening. They seemed very much in love, but I wasn't there that night. I was home, helping Jacob with his math homework while Emily practiced piano. Someone else was playing my role in Daniel's life. I hired a private investigator. I know it sounds crazy, but I had to know. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. Every time Daniel touched me, I wondered where his hands had been." The investigator's name was Tom Bradley. He was an older man with kind eyes who had seen this story 1,000 times before. "Mrs. Morgan," he said gently, "are you sure you want to know? Some doors can't be closed once they're opened." "I have to know," I whispered. I'm dying inside not knowing. 3 weeks later, he gave me photos that shattered my world into a million pieces. Daniel with a woman, young, blonde, beautiful. They were kissing outside Elements Physical Therapy and Wellness Center on McKinney Avenue, the yoga studio where she worked. Her name was Vanessa Carter. She was 28 years old, a yoga instructor at the fancy gym Daniel had invested in 6 months ago. There were dozens of photos. Daniel and Vanessa holding hands at the Arboretum. Daniel and Vanessa shopping at North Park Mall. Daniel buying her jewelry at Tiffany & Co., my husband of 12 years. Playing house with another woman. They looked happy. Happier than Daniel and I had been in years. Maybe happier than we'd ever been that night. I confronted him. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the photos. I threw them on our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of family meals. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Daniel didn't even try to deny it. He barely glanced at the photos. He just looked at me with cold, empty eyes that I didn't recognize. "Her name is Vanessa, and I love her." Those 5 words ended my marriage. "How long?" I asked. 8 months. "Do you love me at all anymore?" He was quiet for so long. I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "I don't think I ever did." Not really. That hurt worse than anything. I want custody of the kids, Daniel said during our first divorce meeting at his lawyer's downtown office. The conference room was cold and sterile, nothing like the warm kitchen where our marriage had died. And I'm keeping the house. I couldn't believe it. Daniel, you can't be serious. The kids need their mother. And this house, we built it together. I gave up my career to raise our children in that home. Actually, Rachel, his lawyer said, sliding papers across the mahogany table. The house is in Mr. Morgan's name only. His company built it, his money paid for it. You have no legal claim to it whatsoever. But I lived there for 8 years. I raised my children there. That doesn't give you legal ownership, Daniel said coldly. And as for the kids, I can provide them with stability. You don't even have a job. My lawyer, Michael Reeves, tried to fight for me. But Daniel was right about the legal details. I had been so trusting, so in love, that I never questioned why my name wasn't on any of the property documents. The house was a wedding gift to my wife, Daniel had said back then. I wanted to surprise her. What a surprise it turned out to be. I'm sorry. Rachel, Michael said after the judge's decision 3 months later. He gets the house, the kids during the week, and you get alternate weekends and 1 evening visit per week. It's not fair, but it's the law in Texas. The parent with more financial stability usually wins. I felt like I was drowning in that courtroom. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for, was being handed to my cheating husband. But the worst part was yet to come. Daniel moved Vanessa into our home within a week of the divorce being final. My kids were living with the woman who destroyed our family, sleeping in the house I had decorated, cooking in the kitchen where I had made them breakfast for years. Mommy, Emily said during one of our phone calls. Vanessa redecorated my room. She said pink was too babyish for me. Vanessa was raising my children, and there was nothing I could do about it. I moved into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Dallas. The walls were thin and painted hospital green. The neighbors upstairs fought every night. The refrigerator made a noise like a dying animal. But it was all I could afford on the small alimony Daniel was court-ordered to pay. It's just temporary, I told myself every morning. Just until I get back on my feet. Without Daniel's income. I had to find work fast. I had a degree in architecture from UT Austin, but I hadn't worked in the field for 10 years. I was a stay-at-home mom who volunteered at school fundraisers and organized playdates. What company would want me now? I applied everywhere. Architecture firms, construction companies, even retail stores. Most didn't even call me back. Finally, Stevens & Associates architecture firm gave me an interview. The office was in a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything about it reminded me of the life I used to have, Mrs. Morgan, the interviewer. Mr. Stevens himself said while studying my resume, "You've been out of the workforce for 10 years. Your portfolio is a decade old. Why should we hire you over someone with current experience?" I looked him straight in the eye. My children's faces flashed in my mind. The tiny apartment, the empty bank account, the ex-husband who thought I was nothing without him, because I have nothing left to lose. And that makes me very dangerous to your competition. He leaned back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. You start Monday, junior architect position. The pay isn't much. But if you're as dangerous as you claim, you won't be junior for long. It was barely enough to pay rent and groceries. But it was a start, for the first time since my world collapsed. I felt a tiny spark of hope. Every Friday at 6 p.m., I picked up Jacob and Emily for our weekend together. The drive to Highland Park was like traveling to another planet. From my run-down apartment complex to the pristine neighborhoods where I used to belong. It broke my heart to see them adjusting to their new life. They were different kids now, more careful with their words, more worried about saying the wrong thing. Mom, Vanessa makes really good pancakes, Emily said one Saturday morning as we sat in a diner booth. She immediately looked guilty. Like she'd betrayed me. I forced a smile. That's nice, sweetheart. I'm glad someone's taking care of you. But they're not as good as yours, Jacob added quickly. He was old enough to understand the delicate balance of our new reality. Old enough to know that talking about Vanessa hurt me. But also old enough to know he had to live with her. Dad bought Vanessa a car, Emily continued innocently. A red one. She lets me pick the music when she drives me to school. Every detail was a knife in my chest. Daniel was building a new life with my replacement. using my children as accessories to their perfect new family. Dad says we might get a new puppy, Emily said, bouncing in her seat. Since Max likes Vanessa better now. Even my dog had chosen them over me. Those weekend visits were torture. I'd pick them up from activities at country clubs I could no longer afford. I'd take them to McDonald's while they told me about the fancy restaurants Vanessa took them to. Then Sunday evening would come, and I'd drop them back at the mansion, my mansion, and watch them run into the arms of Daniel and Vanessa. The house that should have been mine. The family that should have been mine. The life that should have been mine. But I smiled and waved goodbye every time, because that's what good mothers do. They protect their children's happiness, even when it destroys their own. At Stevens & Associates, I threw myself into work. Architecture had always been my passion. Even before I met Daniel, I worked late nights, studied new building codes, and learned everything I could about construction law. My boss, Mr. Stevens, noticed my dedication. Rachel, you have a gift for spotting problems others miss. I'm putting you on the city planning review team. This job involved checking building permits and blueprints for the city of Dallas. I had to make sure all new constructions followed safety codes and zoning laws. It was boring work, but it paid well. And I was good at it, really good at it. 6 months into my new job, I was assigned to review old building permits for a city audit. I was looking for patterns in construction violations to help Dallas improve their approval process for future developments. I stayed late most nights, going through boxes of dusty files in the city planning basement. It was mindless work that helped keep me from thinking about my empty apartment and my broken life. That's when I saw it. A familiar address in faded blue ink, 1247 Highland Park Drive. My old house, Daniel's house. The mansion. My heart started racing. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the original blueprints. These were the plans Daniel had submitted to the city 8 years ago when he built our dream home. As I studied them under the fluorescent lights, my trained eye caught something the original inspectors had clearly missed. The support beams were too thin for a house that size, at least 30% under what building codes required. The electrical wiring didn't meet current safety standards. The foundation calculations were wrong for the soil type in Highland Park. But there was more. The materials list didn't match what was actually used. The permits were signed by Inspector Williams, a man who had been fired 5 years ago for taking bribes. This house should never have been approved for construction. This house was a death trap, and my children were living in it. I stared at those blueprints until my eyes burned. Daniel had cut every corner, bribed every official, and ignored every safety code to save money on our dream home. The man who claimed to love his family had built them a house that could collapse at any moment. I stayed late that night, going through every document related to 1247 Highland Park Drive. The more I dug, the worse it got. Daniel had bribed the original inspector. The permits were falsified. The construction materials were cheaper than what was listed on the official reports. My hands were shaking as I realized what this meant. My children were living in an unsafe house. And legally, I could do something about it. I called Michael, my lawyer, at 11 p.m. Michael, I found something. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? And bring a construction expert with you. Rachel, what's going on? I'm about to destroy Daniel's perfect life. The next morning, Michael arrived with Dr. James Wheeler, a structural engineer. I showed them everything I'd found. Dr. Wheeler studied the blueprints with a magnifying glass. After 2 hours, he looked up. Mrs. Morgan, this house is extremely dangerous. The foundation could collapse. The electrical system is a fire hazard. If the city knew about these violations, they would condemn the property immediately. And if the insurance company knew? I asked. They would void the policy. The homeowner would be liable for all damages. And if anyone was hurt because of these violations, well, that's criminal negligence. Michael smiled for the first time since my divorce. Rachel, you might just get your revenge after all. We had to be careful. If we moved too fast, Daniel might try to cover his tracks. We needed to build an airtight case. First, I secretly documented everything from my position at the city planning office. Every violation, every bribed inspector, every illegal shortcut Daniel had taken. Then, Michael hired an independent construction company to do a routine inspection of the neighborhood. They would randomly check several houses, including 1247 Highland Park Drive. Meanwhile, I started visiting Jacob and Emily more often. I told Daniel I wanted to help with homework at the house. "That's very mature of you, Rachel," Vanessa said during one visit. "I'm glad we can all be friends." I smiled sweetly. "Of course, Vanessa. I just want what's best for my children." What I was really doing was taking photos. Cracks in the walls that Daniel had painted over. Electrical outlets that sparked. Water stains on the ceiling that showed the roof was leaking. The house was falling apart, just like my marriage had. 3 weeks later, the independent inspector showed up at Daniel's door. "Mr. Morgan, we're doing routine safety checks in the neighborhood. May we inspect your property?" Daniel couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. Within 2 hours, the inspector had documented everything. Foundation problems, electrical violations, structural weaknesses. Everything I had found and more. That afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. "Mrs. Morgan, this is Inspector Davis from Dallas City Planning. We need to discuss some serious violations at 1247 Highland Park Drive." "Oh my," I said, pretending to be shocked. "That's my ex-husband's house. My children live there part-time." "Are they in danger?" "Ma'am, we're condemning the property effective immediately. No one can live there until these violations are fixed." I was at work when my phone rang. It was Daniel and he was screaming. "Rachel, what did you do?" "The city is here with trucks and police. They're making us leave the house." "Daniel, calm down." "What's happening?" "They say the house has major safety violations. They're putting up barriers. We have to get out now." I could hear chaos in the background. Vanessa was crying. The kids were asking questions. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do to help?" "This is your fault somehow." "I know it is." He hung up. 20 minutes later, Emily called me, crying. "Mommy, they made us leave the house. They say it's not safe." "Where are we going to live?" "Don't worry, baby. You can stay with me until Daddy figures things out." For the first time in months, my children were coming home to me. 2 days later, Daniel's insurance company called him with devastating news. Because of the building violations, his policy was void. They would not only refuse to pay for repairs, they were demanding he pay back the original coverage amount. But here's the twist that made everything perfect. The insurance policy was still in both our names from before the divorce. Daniel had never changed it. Since I was still legally listed as a policyholder, and since I was the one who reported the safety violations as required by law, the insurance company owed me the payout for damages caused by construction fraud, $8 million. The amount Daniel had claimed the house was worth. Michael called me with the news on a Friday afternoon. "Rachel, sit down. The insurance check is being processed. $8 million. It should arrive next week." I couldn't speak. After all the pain, all the humiliation, all the nights crying myself to sleep, I was about to become richer than Daniel had ever been. But the best part was still coming. "And Rachel? Daniel's been arrested." "What?" "Construction fraud, bribery of city officials, and endangering minors. He could face serious jail time." That weekend, Jacob and Emily stayed with me in my tiny apartment. We ordered pizza and watched movies on my small TV. "Mom," Jacob said, "are we going to be okay?" I hugged him tight. "Baby, we're going to be more than okay. We're going to be amazing." The check arrived on a Tuesday. $8 million, made out to Rachel Morgan. I deposited it that same day. My first purchase? A lawyer. Not for me, for Daniel. I wanted to make sure he had good legal representation for his criminal trial. I didn't want him claiming later that he got a bad deal because he couldn't afford a good lawyer. I wanted him to face justice fair and square. My second purchase? A beautiful house in uptown Dallas. Modern, sleek, and built to the highest safety standards. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a huge backyard for the kids to play in. And the best part? It cost only $2 million. I still had $6 million left. With my new house, my stable job, and my substantial bank account, Michael and I went back to court to fight for custody. "Your Honor," Michael said, My client now has a safe, stable home environment. Meanwhile, the children's father is facing criminal charges and has no permanent residence. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue, but the facts were clear. Daniel was living in a hotel with Vanessa, waiting for his trial. I was living in a mansion with a trust fund set up for the kids' college education. The judge's decision was swift. Custody is awarded to Mrs. Rachel Morgan. Mr. Morgan will have supervised visitation rights pending the outcome of his criminal trial. I had my children back. 6 months later, I got a call from the city. Mrs. Morgan, we're ready to demolish the condemned property at 1247 Highland Park Drive. As the insurance beneficiary, you have the right to be present if you choose. I chose to be there. I brought Jacob and Emily with me. We stood across the street and watched as the wrecking ball swung into the mansion that had once represented all my dreams. Why are you smiling, Mom? Emily asked. Because, sweetheart, sometimes you have to tear down the old house before you can build a new one. The mansion crumbled into dust and rubble, just like Daniel's lies had crumbled when the truth came out. Daniel was sentenced to 3 years in prison for construction fraud, bribery of public officials, and reckless endangerment. The judge was not kind to him. Vanessa? She left him the day he was arrested. Turns out, she wasn't interested in being the girlfriend of a broke criminal with no house and no prospects. Even in prison, Daniel was learning what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you trusted. Jacob and Emily were thriving in ways I hadn't seen in years. They were sleeping through the night again. They were laughing again. They were healing. Me? I got promoted to senior architect at Stevens & Associates after my success with the Highland Park case. The city hired our firm to audit all of Daniel's other construction projects. We found violations in 12 more buildings. My reputation as the architect who could spot dangerous construction flaws made me one of the most sought-after experts in Dallas. But the real victory isn't the money or the house or even getting my kids back. The real victory is what I learned about myself. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. I learned that when someone tries to destroy you, you don't have to just survive. You can thrive. I learned that revenge isn't about hurting someone else. It's about building yourself up so high that their opinion of you doesn't matter anymore. 3 years ago, Daniel told me I was nothing without him. He said I couldn't make it on my own. He said I needed him to survive. He was wrong. He took the kids, the dog, and the mansion. But he couldn't take my strength. He couldn't take my intelligence. He couldn't take my education or my work ethic or my ability to see through lies. He couldn't take my capacity to love my children. He couldn't take my ability to rebuild from absolutely nothing. He couldn't take my $8 million comeback. And that, my friends, is a victory worth celebrating. 3 years ago, I was a broken woman with nothing but weekend visits and a broken heart. Today, I'm a successful architect, a devoted mother, and a woman who knows exactly what she's worth. The mansion in Highland Park is gone, bulldozed into dust and memory. But the real foundation, the one built on truth, hard work, and genuine love, that foundation will last forever. Has anyone ever cheated or betrayed you like this? If yes, how did you take your revenge? Tell me in the comments below.